Okay, so yesterday we have covered about what Spark architecture looks like, right? In a Spark architecture, it's a master-slave architecture, right? There's one master, there's a resource manager in between, and then there are executors. And we all know one thing. Just 1 second, guys. Okay, so we all know one thing, that the basic abstraction of a Spark is RDD. Whatever we do in Spark, behind the scene, it is RDD, right? So how things works, let's see quickly here. So you write a program. Let's say you write this program, simple program, right? So I'll copy this program. You write this program, right? And you created the jar out of this program. So let's say the jar which you created is, let's say, is called my test.jar, right? You created this. Now you want to run this program. So what you will do? You will push this jar using, like, you will run this jar using Spark Submit, right? How Spark Submit works? The Spark Submit works like, you need to write Spark-submit. What Spark Submit will do? Submit will submit your jar to the driver, right? Spark Submit will submit your jar to the driver. So what you need to say? You need to give 4 or 5 parameters. Let's go to Spark Submit here. So, and let's copy this thing for my thing. So let's go here. So you need to write something like this, right? So you need to say Spark Submit, then the main class. What's the main class here? So main class will be our test. Our main class is test. So we'll write test here, right? What is our master? Let's say the master is Yarn, right? What is our deployment mode? Deployment mode can be 2 things, cluster and client. So let's say we are working client, okay? And forget about these 2 options. We don't want any other parameters to be passed. Let's remove this. We don't want any additional argument. Let's remove this. And let's say, what is our application jar? So what is our application jar? Our application jar is my test.jar. So this is how it will work, right? And let's remove this. So whenever you run this command, what is going on behind the scene? You will run this command onto some command line. This Spark Submit, whenever your command line will see this is Spark Submit, what it will do? It will transfer this jar, this particular jar, to the driver, right? Here is your driver into your, right? And this driver will work with your resource manager. And then resource manager will do a number of things and create containers. And inside those containers, we have executor, right? So this is how the whole process will work. Now, what is going on behind the scene? What driver will be doing? Driver will transfer this jar to each executor. Here, how many executors will be having, right? But what I'm trying to convey here, that whenever you are transferring the jar, this is your program, right? This is your program written in Scala or maybe Java or maybe Python or maybe R, and anything, right? And your data is stored here. So your data is stored here in block. So what your Spark driver will be doing for you? So in Spark driver, you have 2 components, right? So one component is called DAG scheduler, and the other component is called task scheduler, right? And we know one thing, in Spark, everything will be converted behind the scene into RDD. So the basic abstraction of Spark is RDD. RDD stands for Resilient Distributed Dataset. So it means your data is distributed across these executors or maybe these nodes, right? These executor, let's call these executor are running on worker node, right? Your data will reside on this worker node, and your executor will be running on the data which is stored on this worker node. But whenever you run a Spark job, over these blocks, SDFS blocks, your partitions will be created. over these partitions, your RDD will be created. Something like this, right? And we covered this thing in a lot of detail, right? So what I'm trying to convey here, let's say you have a RDD1, right? From this RDD1, you create a RDD2. From this RDD2, you create a RDD3, right? And you can do any operation. Let's say on RDD1, you did a map, RDD2 is created. On RDD2, you did a filter, RDD3 is created. And here you used RDD3 for two actions. You used collect here, right? And you use count here, right? The collect and count are action, right? If you don't remember, let's go here quickly. So 1 second. Yeah. So what is this? So collect is the action and even count is the action, right? So even count is action. So we did two actions. So what we did two actions, collect and count, right? So ideally, whenever you run any action, your DAG will be created behind the scene. Your DAG will be created, right? So how DAG will looks like? DAG will look like some exactly like this. So this is your one DAG, right? And this is your, let me, yeah. So this is your another DAG, right? Something like this. RDD1 to RDD2 to RDD3, then collect. This is your one DAG. The second DAG is RDD1, RDD2, RDD3, and count. So guys, one thing is very sure, we are doing something wrong. Whenever you guys see some duplication, whenever, it's nothing to do with the Spark, it has nothing to do with distributed computing, but whenever you are doing some duplication, it is not good, right? And what we are seeing here, we are replicating this particular thing here. So what Spark researchers thought when they were creating RDD, see, whenever we are talking about Spark, we are talking about MapReduce, we are talking about Hive, we are talking about big data, means very large amount of data. Although these RDDs are lazy in nature, right? RDDs are lazy in nature. Till the time action is not triggered, this RDD like will stay where they are. They won't be executed. But let's say if we put one action, then this whole RDD will be converted to some physical plan and that will be executed. If we hit another action on the same RDD, the whole RDD will be executed again, created some physical plan, and then action will be executed, right? So let's say in RDD1 we are reading 1 GB of file. In RDD2 we are let's say extracting some words, extraction word, right? In RDD3 we are filtering the word with start with name N, alphabet N, and in RDD2 we are one time collecting it, so one time we are counting it. So let's say your file looks like something like this. Nilendra is no one, right? Nandini is a girl, something like this, right? So we have only two lines. So what it will be doing, it will read the file like this. It will extract all the words. So it will extract Nilendra here, Nandini here, is girl, whatever. And here it will here in RDD3 it will filter only Nilendra and Nandini, because I'm filtering any word which will start with N. So here it will only take two words. What I'm doing here, I'm collecting the words, so it will give me, the collect will give me Nilendra and Nandini both, and it will give me 2, right? This is how it works. But in the whole process, we can see that inside, behind the scene, only this is getting counted. Like this 2 is generated somewhere from this, right? Because this result 1, 2, and this result is 2. It means this result is directly driven from the collect. So what these guys think of, can we store this RDD3 into some memory, right? Can we store this RDD3 into some memory, and then whenever we need it, we can fetch it? So one thing is very clear, and one thing is very easy to understand that when we talk about RAM is faster to read, right? Cache is super fast, RAM is faster, and hard disk is the slowest one, right? So what these guys thought of, if we are using some RDD again and again for the same calculation, let's cache it. And that's where the concept of caching comes in, right? Let's remove this. And that's where the concept of caching comes in. What caching means? That if you are reusing some calculation, so what RDDs are? RDDs are calculation or transformation on some data, right? So let's say if you are using RDD3, which came out of reading a file, extracting words from it, and filtering some words from it. So ideally you did three transformation on one file, and you get RDD3. Let's say what these transformations were: reading a file, the second were mapping or extraction, or you can say extraction of words. The third is filtering, right? So these three transformations will create a RDD3. And let's say if you want to use this RDD3 for multiple things, right? So what you can do, these people are saying you can cache it. You can put this thing into memory. What is the benefit of this? Now let's say if you run first action on this action 1, obviously this whole thing will be running. But when you hit action 2, this thing will be skipped for action 2. This thing won't be running. What it will do, if this RDD is cached, it will put, after the first action, it will put everything into memory, and action 2 will read that RDD data from here. So see, now think, right? So this is called caching, right? Or persisting the data. So what in Hadoop language now, let's go here. So we use cache and persist method. Spark provide an optimization mechanism to store an intermediate computation of an RDD data frame or data set. Don't worry if you don't know this thing, so that they can be reused in the subsequent actions. Reusing RDD data frame and data set computation result will make your computation faster, right? Both caching and persisting are used to save RDD, right? The difference between cache, okay, now there are two methods to put the RDD into memory. So you know one thing, that we are trying to put some intermediate RDD into memory because we don't want to calculate that intermediate RDD. We don't want to calculate. So what these guys are saying, there are two methods. The first method is cache. The second method is persist, right? So there are two ways we can put the intermediate RDD into memory. The first is cache, the second is persist. Now the question arises, why we are doing it? That's the first thing. And we know the answer, that okay, Spark intermediate computation can be put into memory. What are the benefits now? The benefits can be, the computation can be very expensive, hence reusing the computation save a lot of cost, right? It can be time efficient. So let's say when you hit one action, your file is 10 gigs, you are doing some filtering, you are doing some mapping, you are doing some n number of things, transformations, and the whole transformation takes 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe let's say 50 minutes, right? And it creates an intermediate RDD named RDD5. Let's say if you're running multiple actions on this RDD, action 1, action 2, and action 3, for each action it will take 50 minutes, obviously, because obviously to create this RDD it will need to go to 5 steps back: RDD4, RDD3, RDD2, RDD1. Like when you hit action 1, it will again go to this path. When you hit action 2, it will go to this path. When you action 3, action 8. So what these people say, let's cache this RDD5 or persist this RDD5. So it is cost efficient, first thing, time efficient, I told you, and execution time is very less, because obviously you do not need to recompute again and again, right? So these are the advantages of caching and persistence. Now, one question, why there are two methods, right? Why there are two methods? Why can't there only one method? So the answer to this question is, when we talk about caching, it's only in memory. It's only in memory, right? Memory means only RAM. So the caching, when we talk about .cache method, it's only in memory. By default, when we talk about RAM in Spark, we call it memory underscore only. So if we just say cache, it will be memory only. It will be by default memory only. If we say persist without any parameters, it will be same as cache. So persist is equal to cache without any parameters. So these two are equivalent because by default they are going to memory only. Now the main difference is in cache, we cannot change the storage level. By default, it will be memory only, and we cannot change in cache. So inside cache, we cannot change it, right? Inside cache, we cannot change it. Sorry, this one, we cannot change it. But in persist, we can change it. Now, if we want to change the persistence level or the storage level of the caching, we will use persist method. In persist method, how we need to use persist method, let me show you here. Okay, let's see quickly. So let's say what I'm doing here. Let me walk through this program. I'm reading one file. Okay, I'm reading one file. I am taking some partition size, forget about it. I'm seeing whether I'm filtering every record which has spaces into it. Okay, and then I'm splitting that records which has spaces into an array. I'm creating a tuple out of it, and then I'm creating the partition size again. I'm counting the partition size, but that's the most important thing. So now, till now, I have what I have. I have array. So what this, one second guys, what this order type is? Order type is array of string and int. Order type of string and int. So this means I'm reading this file. I'm just going through it again. I'm reading this file, right? And then what I'm finding, I'm filtering any data which has spaces into it, right? And then I am thinking to pull only order status and put one into behind the scene, and I'm creating a tuple. So from this line, from this particular line, so this was the original line, right? One second. So this was my original line. Sorry. So this was my original line. So when I run my Spark program, it will give me this result, where it will till here it will give me this result, right? So what this says, that I have 4 elements in my array. 1, 2, 3, 4. Array is 0 index based, right? I'm using 4th index. Since it is 0 index, so I will say what is it is equivalent to. Let's my array is X, so I've been saying give me 4th element and put 1 across it and put this into tuple. This is what I'm doing, as simple as that, right? And this is the function, this is what function is doing, right? So till now I have calculated everything and I have extracted the order status and put 1 after it, right? So let's remove this, else it will corrupt my file. So I'll remove it, I'll save it now. And after this, what I want, so on this order type in which you have order status and 1 appended to it to create the pair RDD, I need to use this particular order type for multiple actions, let's say, right? I need to reduce by key on the order type, I need to group by key on the order type, and I need to collect the order type. So I'm performing 3 actions, right? I'm performing 3 actions. So what I did here, since you guys can see here, even I'm performing 4 actions. So I'm doing reduce by key, group by key, collect, and count, right? So what I did here, I did cache, and by default, what it did, see the definition, it is caching the RDD of string and int. So what this cache method is doing, it is caching the RDD of string and int. Let's say, and let's run it just to make sure that it's running, right? So we'll see. Let's run it. Okay, and meanwhile this is running. Let's go here and see something else. Okay, we'll go to that section later. So cache means memory only, but in persist we can change a lot of things. By default, if we don't give anything to persist method, it will be memory only by default, right? Now the most important thing, let's say we have an RDD, we have a RDD of 1 gig. It means when we say we have an RDD of 1 gig, we have partitions of this particular RDD summed up to 1 gig. So obviously RDD is a set of partitions and these partitions are summed up to 1 gig. But my RAM in my system is, let's say I have one laptop which has 1 gig of RAM. But since I have my operating system, different kind of stuff is running, this is 900 MB remaining here, right? And I try to put this RDD here. Will it work in case of memory only? I don't think so. It will give out of it won't work. I'm not sure whether it will give error or not, but it won't fit into memory. It may give out of memory error. It may give out of memory error, right? Now, what is the solution behind it? So what Spark researchers says, guys, don't need to worry. If you don't have enough memory available, what you can do, you can split the storage level between disk and memory. So you can decide where you need to put. So the first priority will always be memory. If your memory is full, it can be spilled. It can be spilled to disk, right? So let's say you have 900 MB of memory available and you have hard disk here and you need to put 1 GB of data. So let's say you have 900 MB will be here and the 100 MB will be spilled to hard disk. This process of pushing data from memory to hard disk is called spilling. Spilling means just fill the memory, just fill the hard disk from the memory, right? So this is called memory and disk. I'll cover all this section. And let's say if you don't want to go for memory at all, right? You can go for disk only. So you have 3 particular options and I'll cover these sections later. So you have memory only, disk only, and memory and disk. But with persist, df.persist, you can use any of this option. Let's see, our program should have run. So yeah, it is running properly. So let's see quickly. Yeah, so let's see where it ran because I need to see on which port it ran. So I'll say port. Okay, so it ran on Spark UI is running on port 4044, right? So I'll go here and then I'll refresh this page. Okay, yesterday I covered one special thing for you guys, that your number of jobs on your Spark UI will be number of actions. So how many jobs we are seeing here? 4 jobs. Let's go to our code. I just need to verify a few things. Let's see. So how many actions we have here? Yeah. So we have first action, second action, third action, and fourth action, right? Our 3 actions are for each. Our 3 actions are for each, and our fourth action is count. Let's go to Spark UI and see if it is making sense, right? So the for each is first action, second action, third action, and fourth action. So it means number of actions will be equal to number of jobs. One thing is proved. Now let's click on one of the job. Let's say I click this job. What I told you guys yesterday, that number of stages is equal to number of white transformations, right? So what it did, this thing is count. So for count, I just counted from map. Yeah, this is a very good example. So what I did, I read the text file, I did the filtering, I did some mapping, I did the mapping, and I counted from that map. So it means, and this green symbol means cache. I'll cover in 2 minutes. But for the counting, what I did here, I just counted from order type. And how order type is created? Order type is created using all the narrow transformations. So how order type is created? When we go to the DAG, right? When we go to the DAG of order type, so order type is created from orders map, right? Order map is created from order filter. Order filter is created from, like, order map is created using map. Then it is again created using map. It is created again using filter. So map and filter are narrow transformation, and that's where there is no stages created, just done in single stage. So when we go here, it's in single stage, because we never used any broad transformations here. We only use narrow transformation, and narrow transformation means all the data is available on single partition to do those transformations. For example, filter, map, and we can find all the data on that particular transformation, right? So this is how it count works. So this is count works, right? So now one more thing is, let's see how our white transformation works. So let's go here. Perfect. So when we, in fact, let's see one thing. In fact, I'll cover it. So what we can see here, in the narrow transformation, everything was done in stage 0. But when we talk about white transformation, a new stage is created. So number of stages is equal to number of white transformations, right? So this reduced by key is a white transformation, so it's create a new stage, right? Now let's go here for this one, for each. It again, group by key is again a white transformation, so it create a new stage, right? And let's go for collect. Yeah, collect is a narrow transformation. Collect is a narrow transformation because I just collected from the last map, and that's why it's the other transformation stage. The stage is not created. Now coming to the number of tasks. So how many tasks are, you can see here, 0, 1 to 3 tasks. Now why we are seeing 3 tasks? The answer is very simple. How many partitions I have created here? 3. So let's do one more thing. Let's create 8 partitions. Okay, let's stop it and let's run it again. So one thing is proved, number of tasks is equal to number of partitions. So we have changed the number of partition to 8. If our theory is correct, there should be 8 tasks here, right? So let's see quickly, and then we will go for the persist. So let's let it run. So it again ran on 4044. That's good. So if we refresh this, still coming. So yeah, this is good. We have only one action completed till now. Let's refresh it again. So we have all the 4 actions done, right? So now let's go for the collect again. So the same thing. Let's number of stages equal to number of broad transformation. And let's go here. How many tasks we are seeing? 8 tasks. Why 8 tasks? Because we put number of partitions at 8 here. And when we see the partition size, so I printed the partition size right here. One second. So I should have partition size here somewhere. In fact, let me stop it because I'm seeing so many things. I'll say error here and I'll run it again. So you can see the partition size is 8. ideally, when we read a file, right? When we read a file, we can say how many partitions we need to divide the file into. So we are saying here we need to divide it in 8 partitions, right? It will print 8 here in 2 minutes because I'm printing the partition size. So let it run in 2 minutes. Yeah, so it print 8, and then I'm printing the partition size again here, so it will print 8 2 times. I was just seeing, I was just showing you. So this is again a very good example. So I have created one file. I have created one RDD with 8 partitions. Here I have printed the file partition size, right? This is done. Then I did filter, I did mapping, I did lot of things, and I printed the partition size again. So when we go to the top, my original partition were 8, this one, right? And my latest partition after mapping and filtering is 8. So it means when we do mapping and filtering, the number of partitions are not impacted, right? And then when we go here, number of tasks is equal to number of partitions. This is what. Things are very simple, right? So one more thing which I need to show you here, that we have cached the result. So here, when we see that we have cached the result of our last map. So whenever we go to any other, any of the, let's say we want to go for each, right? So what it is ideally doing, it is reading result from the cache. From where it is reading? It is reading result from the cache. And that's why the whole pipeline needs not to be recalculated. Okay, let's see one more example how persist work. Okay, so if you see here, I have cached it, right? I have cached it. Now let's persist it. So I'll say dot persist and see this thing. So persist is asking for what? It is asking for storage label, right? In cache, we do not need to mention anything. In persist, we can skip it. It will by default take the memory only. But let's say we go for storage label. Storage label and say dot. So in dot, 1 second, copy here, Control V, and we'll say dot. No, it's not coming. Anyways, so we'll say memory underscore only. Okay, one thing is, okay, let's do one thing. I need to copy something. So let's say persist, and I'll say here persist, and I'll copy this. Sorry. What's that actually? I don't remember the import. So it's persist. So if you don't remember the import, it is asking Apache org Apache Spark dot storage level, org dot Apache dot Spark dot storage level. So we need to import that, right? org dot Apache dot Spark. So we'll go here, and we'll say storage level. Like this. I'm not sure. Just one more second, guys. Dot persist. So what is that? Storage and storage level. So storage S is small. So we'll say storage. Perfect. Then we will say storage level here, right? And dot. Perfect. It worked, right? So what I was trying to say that, okay, when we say, first of all, we need to import the storage level. And then when I'm calling storage level object here, it is giving me too many options. Fantastic. So let's say we want to go for which option? We want to go for memory and disk, right? And when I run it again, let's stop it first. Let's run it again. In fact, let's do one more thing here. And let me stop it. Let me show you one more thing. So what we can say, so let's say print order type. Let's see the lineage or DAG, right? Dot to string, right? So what I want to see, I want to see lineage, how it is working. Okay, so let's run it again. So what I'm doing here, I have shown you how cache works. So cache means memory only. Here what I did, I use the persist. The difference between cache and persist is we can change the storage label. We can decide where we need to store, right? What I'm doing here, I need to show you something, that how it looks when you print the, okay, perfect. This is what I want to show you. Okay, so when I printed this, right? So what it is showing you guys, that okay, first you read the file, right? Hadoop IDD is created, then you did some map partition, then you filter, then you mapped it, then what you did, you stored it into disk and memory into deserialized format, and the replicated is one time. What it means, let me copy this line and explain it to you in details. Okay, so when we go here and I copy this line here, so what this says, since I used memory and disk, right? So what this says, your RDD is stored into disk and memory into deserialized way, and the replication is 1. Okay, now let's go one by one. You guys know disk means disk, memory means RAM. Now coming to deserialized, this is most important. So okay, there are two things, and deserialize and serialize are very, very generic programming constructs. So when you talk about deserialization, this is Java thing, right? Deserialization, what it means, that you are storing objects onto disk or on memory into their raw format. You're not converting them into bytes. You're not converting them into bytes. You're storing them as objects. You're storing them in objects. Opposite of deserialization is serialization. Serialization means you are converting your objects or your raw data into bytes. Bytes means 101010, right? Something like this. According to you guys, which one is more space efficient? More space efficient will be serialization. Like space efficient means where it will take less space to store more data. So let's say we have 1 GB of file. When we serialized it, it may become 200 MB. In deserialized format, it is 1 gig, right? So serialization will make your data more compact, and it can store the data onto disk or memory in a better way. Now coming to when to go for serialization and when to go for deserialization. So one thing is very clear: when we need to have less data stored, when we want to have the more compaction, we will go for serialization. When we want to go for when we want to read fast, like, okay, before I go for the drawback of deserialization, what are the benefits of serialization? The benefit of serialization is it will compact the data, so the storage will be less. Now, what are the drawbacks? Since we have done too much compaction, we have converted our objects into bytes. When we want to read the data, the other process needs to be done. So it means whenever you want to read the data, the process of deserialization needs to be done over this, and then only you will read the data. Makes sense, right? So you will do some uncompaction, you will do some logic, and then you'll read the data. In case of deserialization, you just read the data directly. So this process is gone. So it means serialization is space efficient, deserialization is time efficient or execution efficient. It will make your process faster. So as a developer, whenever you are working with this persist method, you need to see whether you need to be execution time efficient or you need to be the space efficiency. Okay, and that's where this memory and disk, memory only, disk only will come handy, and that's what it is written here. Okay, so whenever you go for memory and disk, right, so what exactly is going on? Your first, what Spark will do, Spark will see how much RDDs can be fitted into memory, and then it will use least recently used algorithm just to see which RDDs are least recently used. Let's say you can only fit 3 RDDs. You can only fit 3 RDDs into a memory. 4th RDD came, right? You want to read the 4th RDD, and out of these 3 RDD, 1, 2, 3, you read this RDD at 2 p.m. This RDD at 2:10 p.m. and this RDD at 2:11 p.m. So according to least recently used RDD, this RDD will be evicted. Evicted means this will go to disk or spilled to disk, and this RDD will come into memory. And this is how memory and disk will come in picture, right? So this is what is written. Let's say we have 3 RDDs, none of them is cached in the executor's memory. There is no available memory left. Meanwhile, another RDD, RDD4 comes in. So Spark will remove the least LRU RDD from the executor memory and make a space for the new RDD that comes in. That's RDD4, right? Now let's assume, and this is the most important thing, let's assume we already have these 3 RDD into cache, and then we want to put the 4th RDD. If we have memory only, if it's not memory and disk, but it's just memory only, then there will be out of memory issue. But if we have memory and disk, the out of memory issue is gone. It will spill the least recently used memory RDD to disk, and it will put the latest RDD into the memory, right? This is how memory and disk work. So you guys know now you guys know 3 things. Let's jump here. So you guys know 2 things. We have cache, we have persist, right? In cache, it's just memory only, right? My writing is very bad, I know, but in cache, it's just memory only. In persist, it can be anything. By default, it's memory. You can change it to memory and disk, right? You can change it to disk only. You can change it to memory only. Now, I have told you 1 more thing, 2 more things: serialization and deserialization. As a developer, you have the control what you need to do. You can say memory and disk serialized, right? Memory and disk serialized. It means please store this data in compact form in both memory and disk, right? You can say disk serialized, right? In memory, it's always deserialized, right? And this is how things works. So when we go here, so when we see here, memory only serialized, memory and disk serialized. So you have covered everything. Now we have only 1 option remaining, that why it is 1 into replicated. So by default, if you never mention anything, it will be only 1 option replicated. Your cache will be only on one worker node. Your cache will be on 1 worker node by default. But if you say disk only 2, memory and disk underscore 2, this underscore 2, what it means that it will store a replicated copy of RDD in other worker node into the cache memory. So it means your cache is replicated as well if you used underscore 2 option. As simple as that, right? So now things are very clear, right? If you want to change the storage level, you will say storage level dot different options. You can say different options. Now let's compare this thing. It's very important. This table is very important. And I have covered this table in a lot of detail, but let's go here. When we talk about memory only, it's high on space. The space is very high, right? And the CPU is very low. It means processing is very fast. It will take a lot of space and the processing will be very fast. When we talk about serialization, memory serialization, since we put the memory into compacting format, so the space will be very low. But since we need to do the decompaction, we need to do the deserialization, it will be high on the CPU. Memory and disk, the space again is very high, like high, and the CPU is medium. Why it's medium? On this option, on the first option, it is low and it is medium because of disk, because disks are slower, right? When we talk about memory and disks in serialized format, then disk is low, the space is low, and the CPU's usage will be very high. CPU needs to do a lot of things. And when we do the disk only, the space, obviously, we have lot of space available on disk, so it is low. But since we need to read from disk again and again, it will be high. Okay, so this is all about cache and persist. Okay, now let's do one more thing, because I need to cover one more thing today. Yeah, so let's go for two more concepts. The first concept is accumulator. Okay, so whenever we work on in a distributed or environment, right, and whenever we want to count something on driver, let's say we want to count the number of empty records on each partition, like let's say black is the empty record, right? Black is empty record, and we want to count the number of empty records on each partition, and we need to send that result to driver. We know one thing that executor, this worker node is running some executor. These executors are nothing but your JVM. It has, this JVM will have RAM, will have CPU, will have everything, and all the processing which is done inside this JVM is local to it, right? JVM is Java virtual machine, it will local to it. But if we want to see the result from the JVM or from the executor onto driver, let's say we want to count the number of empty records on each partition, and we need to publish the records onto the driver, we will go for accumulator. Now let's read the definition. A Spark accumulator are shared variables, right? So this particular variables, if we create a Spark accumulator, this variable will be shared across different RDDs or different partitions or different JVMs, and which are only added through associative and commutative operations. Associative means A plus B plus C is equal to B plus A plus C in some way. So it means associative. And commutative means A plus B is equal to B plus A. Something like this, right? So what it means, and in very simple mathematics, they can majorly they will be used only for addition. Okay, so and they are same as counters in MapReduce. Okay, so what is your first shared variable? It's called accumulator. Accumulator are used to count something on each partition and to produce or to present the result onto the driver, right? So we can have two types of accumulators. One is named accumulator, one is unnamed accumulator. As the name suggests, if we want to give a name to the accumulator, we can use name accumulator, and then if you don't want to give a name, it will be unnamed accumulator, right? So when you create a named accumulator, you can see the name on the Spark UI. I'll show it to you in 2 minutes. And when you create an unnamed accumulator, you won't see a name. Okay, so let's see quickly. So let's say I create this accumulator. Let's say I want to create it here. Okay, it's not started, so let's create it here. So let's say I created this accumulator here. Here. Okay, so I created one accumulator and I gave that name accumulator is sum of accumulator, right? And now let's say if I want to see, okay, that's fantastic. So I name this accumulator as accum, right? I name this accumulator as accum, and let's say, let's copy this line as well. So let's see one quick thing. So what I'm trying to say here, whenever I see a C, whenever I see a C alphabet into my file, what you need to do? You need to add 1 to the accumulator value. You need to add 1 to the accumulator value. So let's say what we need to do here, we'll say x is equal to, or x, if x, one second. So let's go here and put a space, not a big deal. And okay, let's do one thing, right? We'll make it simple. Put a space, put a space, put a space, and put a space, and Control S, right? And I just put the spaces here, and I don't want to do this stuff. I will comment this all stuff. Okay, and what I need to do, into this orders underscore file, into this order underscore file, if for each, if x, and I name this accumulator as myAccum, just for time being, right? So what I'm showing you here, and whenever I see a space into my file, right, then add accumulator value to add 1. So first I created the accumulator, a long accumulator. You can create an int accumulator or anything, right? And you pass a name to it. Then what you are telling that, okay, whenever you see a space or blank line, just add 1 to that value, right? And let's say print myAccum, and I need to print the value, right? But I can say print dot value. Okay, let's run it. So we have created one accumulator. We named that accumulator as some accumulator, and inside that accumulator, in fact, we don't need it, so we remove it. So inside that accumulator, we are adding one value whenever we are seeing a blank line. So I've created a few blank line intentionally here. I have saved that file, and let's see quickly. Let's see. So if I go here, perfect, it worked, right? In fact, so basically, let's do one thing so that you guys won't get confused. So the first 8 is the number of partitions, but I will not get confused here. And okay, one second, Control Z. So I'll say println, and I'll say println, and I'll run it again. Okay, so when we go here, how many lines we have created? 1, 2, 3, and on the top we have one more. That's 4 lines. We have created 4 blank lines, right? So what it is doing for me, first it counts the number of partitions. That has nothing to do with the accumulator, but I'm just showing you. It printed the number of partition, and then it printed the number of blank lines. Now go to the example again. The same thing what we are doing. So we have, into our case, we have 8 partitions. Inside each partition, it is counting the number of blank lines. And when it found the blank line, it is adding 1 plus 1 to my accumulator, right? So into my case, it gave us 4. This is how accumulator works. So accumulator is the shared variable when you want to count something from each partition, right? The other shared variable is the other shared variable. Okay, this is called name accumulator. Let me show you one more thing, right? So let's see where it has created a job for us. No, I think it should be 5 then. No. Let me see quickly. Just 1 second. I'll say info here just to see which port it is running the job, right? And I need to show you the accumulator name on the UI. Okay, 1 second. So it is running our job on 4046. Okay, so that's why it is not showing you here. Control Z localhost, and you will see 4046, and you'll go to for each, and then here, and then you can go to DAG visualization. Show where's the accumulator. 1 second. Temp order. So you'll see one here. I'm not sure why it's not showing it here. One second, guys. So let me see quickly. It should show here somewhere. Input says good. We have 8 partitions. So name of the accumulator is sum accumulator, right? I'll check it later, but this is how accumulator work, right? So I'll check it maybe in some time. But here, if you see, it worked for us, right? So you have 8 partitions, and then you have 4 blank lines. So I'll stop it now, and I'll go to the other shared variable that is called broadcast variable. Okay, so we know one thing, right? We know one thing, that you have your driver, and then you have your executors, right? So these are your executors, and these are your driver. On executors, you have data, right? Means on the worker node, you have data and your process. So let's say you have one lookup file. Lookup file means what? That you have one table. Let's say the table called look like this, the customer table. Okay, your table is customer. In customer, we have customer ID. The second is customer name, and third is product number, right? So 1 Nilendra, product number is 5. Now the question arises, and one more table is product. In product, we have product. So let's say 5 means football, 6 means badminton. So what it means, that customer ID 1, whose name is Nilendra, has purchased football, right? Customer ID 2, whose name is, let's say, ABC, purchased 6. So whenever you want to see the full result, because obviously 5 and 6 won't make sense to the customers and users, right? So we need to see something like this: 1 nil football, 2 ABC badminton. So now there are multiple ways to do it, right? The easiest way is join these 2 tables on product number. Join these 2 tables on product number, and you'll get the result. The most simplest way. But when you join the tables, right, and we know when we join the tables, it will create shuffling, right? Because we cannot make sure that the full data of the join is available on any table or any node. So maybe you have Nilendra here with 1, but maybe the product, this particular 1 and 5, so this is one record is presenting here, but you cannot guarantee that the fifth record of the product is on the same node. You cannot guarantee, and that's where joining will always leads to shuffling. Now the question arises, how we can prevent the joining, how we can prevent the shuffling. So what these people says, because there can be very limited number of products, right? How many products can be? 10,000 sports product, 10,000, 20,000, right? Maximum. What is the size of this file? Maybe 25 MB. So what these people suggested, rather than you join the table, what you can do, you can throw this file or you can broadcast this file before the joining process starts, before your execution starts, to each of the node. So what they call, if your file, if your table is small enough to fit into the memory, then just give this file to each node. Now we see that, okay, Nilendra 1 is here and he purchased fifth record. Since I have full table of product is here, and when I join this, there will be no shuffling. There will be no shuffling because each record which is needed for the joining is presented on the each node, and that's where the broadcast variable will come handy. So we can broadcast variable if we want to do some lookup. Broadcast means you will broadcast it to each and every executor, right, before start of the execution. So let's go to broadcast variable. Same thing. So you can create broadcast variable, same thing as like we created the accumulator, sc.accumulator. You can say sc.broadcast, and you can say some variable name. And when you say m here, the variable name is m, then you can broadcast that to each and every worker node, right? So it is available for the execution for each of the executor, right? So let's read it. So when you run a Spark ID data from job that is broadcast variable defined in use, Spark does the following. Spark breaks the job into stages that have distributed shuffling, and actions are executed with the stages. I don't want to go into detail, but let's go into the practical things. Okay, so let's say, and I won't be executing it. It's very simple. I will share this notes to you. You guys can execute. So what I say, I created an array of elements 1, 2, 3, and I have broadcasted it. Okay, so what it did, it created a broadcast variable, right, with the name broadcast var. So it is broadcast var, and the type of this broadcast var is org.apache.spark.broadcast.broadcast, right? Now we can, same as accumulator, if we need to see the value of broadcast variable, we can say broadcast.value. It will give us the whole value, right? So this is how it works on the very simple level. But as I was telling you guys, if we want to do some lookup. So let's say I created two maps. The first map is country map. The second map is state maps. So in the states, you have NY, CA, FL, and you map them to New York, California, and Florida. And in countries, you have USA, United States of America, IN means India, right? And now your data looks something like this. James Smith lives in USA in CA. Rose living in USA and NY, something like this. But I need to see the full thing. I need to see James Smith, United States of America and California. I need to see something like this. So what I did here, I broadcasted both my country map and states map. And then there are two functions in broadcast. First function is called value, like b.value, it will give you value. And the second function is b.get. b.get. So now when you say b.get and you pass CA, what this function will be doing, broadcast.get will do, it will go to the original map here and it will give the California to you and it will give the full result here. This is how your broadcast will work. First, you need to broadcast using sc.broadcast. And then let's say you want to broadcast states, so you'll say some simply states here, right? and you will say something here. Let's say BS means broadcaster state. Now, if we need to go for the mapping, what you can say? BS dot get, and then you can pass anything. So let's say if we pass FL. So how map works? When you pass a key, it will give you the value. So the get will something like this, 100%. So the two variables, shared variables, are broadcast variable and your accumulator. Broadcast will be helping you for the lookup table. Accumulator will be helping you for summation of the common results, right? So I think this is all for today. I'll stop the recording now. Any